My name is Mark Tsirekas. I'm an entrepreneur in residence at the Trinity Group. Before that, I was a product manager for eBay on the seller side, and I built the self-serve advertising platform for Schibsted Media Group in the UK, powering small and medium businesses. An entrepreneur in residence is, I guess, a hybrid between an entrepreneur's role and the product manager's role, in the sense that, so for instance, in the UK at least, the entrepreneurs in residence that I know of are brought into larger corporations, and they're funded directly by the corporation in order to create, assess new markets and create new products in these markets. So entrepreneurs in residence built new companies from scratch, exactly like being an entrepreneur, but having more a wider access to resources and a larger cushion, which is more similar to what a product manager does. The difference between an entrepreneur in residence and a product manager, again, in my experience, has been that the product manager usually comes into an already existing vision. There might already be traction in the product, or certain operational aspects have been resolved, and they keep building on top of that and drill down really into the product, the metrics, and the users. Whereas the entrepreneur in residence has to really define what is this company going to be, run hiring, operations, finance, and all the other facets of a business. A relevant problem. I like to start from trying to think of the things that I hate, because I think that's a really important driver to try to make a change, or a single motivator of identifying. If you have a problem or something that you hate, there's a decent chance that other people have the same problem. I think the most objective way, though, and a lot of people undervalue it, is to observe a problem that somebody else is having. So you're not exactly biased, but you're seeing a problem that somebody else has already voiced to you. And I think that's the best, most serendipitous eureka moment you can get. And then there is also other ways of finding problems which are a bit more technical and analytical. So for instance, you might go in an industry that you have experience in and drill down to the actual exchange of value between players. Analyze the value chain and basically identify a lot of inefficiencies that are happening between these exchanges of players and dynamics, in which case then you can extrapolate and say, if there was a solution that covered that inefficiency, would it be interesting? And finally, I think there's this kind of more marginal exercise, which is more suitable for B2C type of products, which is the opposite of the hate one. It's actually, what is delightful? So what would be cool if it happened? And then you can think about that in a very lateral thinking, open-ended way about any sort of industry, without thinking of constraints at all, actually. So let's say you have this new idea now, and you want to assess if you should proceed in it. Then basically the big elephant in the room is, can I make money out of it? And there is everybody has a different process, and I think business is more of an art than a science. So we should have some sort of process, but it does not mean 100% is right. The first thing that is a good exercise for anyone to do is understand the total addressable market. You can start top down and start drilling down to what would be your specific customer, or you can go bottom down from your specific customer, almost like an inverted pyramid, and understand how big the general market is. If the market is big enough and your target audience is a significant portion of that market, so that it makes sense for your investors or for the larger company to fund that project, then that's a good thing. But obviously in entrepreneurship specifically, we've seen that a lot of markets that seem very small in the beginning are not necessarily that small, or could become bigger or create a market. So that's just a check. Then the other thing that I personally really enjoy doing is understanding the competition very well. So consolidation or fragmentation of the market, that's a really good indicator, and specifically for marketplace type of products. If a market is consolidated, then one player is dominant, or at least a couple of players are dominant, and they really control the market in ways that will make it difficult for you to penetrate potentially, because you could face retaliation if you try to do traditional things like undercutting them in price, or aggressive marketing, or even a product offering that is unique that you might feel that you get copied. On the other hand, if they're fragmented in the industry, then you can start attacking the market with an architectural innovation. So you essentially become a provider for every single player that is in the market and is alone. Potentially find advantages because they could not scale their product economics. Another thing is understanding what is the current competitive advantage in this market that you're trying to compete. Who is the best rendition of a product in this market and why? And what does that competitive advantage constitute? Can you copy it? Can you surpass it? Or is it something that's really solid? Google would be a really good example of a competitive advantage in search that is unsurmountable, some would say. And finally, another really interesting thing about the market would be your capital expenditure structure. So if, for example, you go into real estate, just to begin with, you need a lot of money up front, whereas if you go and build a business online, the money that you need if it's a web app, for instance, might be less comparatively. So what does that mean about your team's competence and your skills on essentially like a comparative comparison with capital expenditure? So once you have a problem in mind, you're trying to make sure that that's a real problem, and then you're building a solution, which is your product, that can, in a scalable fashion, tackle that problem. And the way you do that is you go and speak to potential users or clients that are facing that problem, and you really just have to listen to what they have to say and specifically understand their user journey, because I think that's a really interesting way of figuring out from the beginning to the end what are all the steps a user is taking to be successful at solving that problem. And during that journey, the user will mention, or hopefully you will pick it up, the several points at which they're facing either a waste of time, of money, or at which there is a really distressful moment in that process. And so all these points are essentially the key opportunities for your product to solve, and then essentially provide value to the customer. If you do that, then that's a clear opportunity. It depends on the product, really. So if you're starting a consumer web product compared to an e-commerce product, it's very different. But generally, validation, or at least is as I perceive it, is some real commitment from your users or your client base, which can then be expressed in some sort of almost cost for them. So when you're getting commitment from your user, it could either be that the user is paying you already, so you have them transact with you, or that they're spending a lot of time in your platform, product, or whatever it is that you're building. And finally, if you can get them to share their social currency, that's another really big one. And so that's why we see in a lot of landing pages nowadays, we have referral schemes that are becoming more and more popular. In contrast to that, I've done that, and I've seen that a lot, that we might use some more vanity metrics. So for instance, a lot of people clicked on my ad, or a lot of people landed on my web page. But I think that the most important thing to consider at that stage, and it is tricky, is did anybody really show commitment to your product? So in my previous company, we were building an app that we were going to monetize in the app, but what we considered, and so the app would be free, but what we thought was a really good experiment is to actually put a ridiculous price for an app that should be free and see if anybody would buy it. A lot of people bought it, and then we made it free immediately because we had already gotten that validation. So if you're running a consumer web business, sometimes you might actually be able to get the validation through the transaction. Sometimes it could be engagement. In our case, that worked. Currently, here I'm working at a marketplace for specialized professional services. And because it is a marketplace, it has the inherent difficulty that you need to validate both the supply and the demand. And so in order to validate the supply, what we did is we asked them to produce content, so specifically write articles for us if they want to be onboarded. The onboarding was a lengthy process, and finally we asked them for exclusive hours. So we we turned that into a financial commitment from them. So we said, like, for those 2 weeks, we need at least 5 hours of your time that they would sell to clients. And so we got that part. We onboarded the supply on that sense and validated them. On the demand side, what we did is we actually asked every single person that was signing up through our landing page to take a really lengthy, and by that I mean something like 5 minutes, of a survey. And so a lot of people did bounce, but the ones that did stay, which was a decent amount, were actually proving that we're on the right track, and now we even have a better idea about who our customers are. You know, because some sort of metric is going way better than you expect. It could be your referrals, it could be your revenue if you have a product that you sell, it could be your general user growth, your acquisition is like costs are dropping suddenly because there's word of mouth, or you perceive to be word of mouth. It's it's one of these things that once you're there, you're there. I think Paul Graham said that actually from Y Combinator. It's a positive surprise. I don't know if there's any formula for product market fit. Usually you somehow grow unexpectedly and magically because you've built the thing that your customer base needs and wants. I guess when you're scaling and you have to deal with simultaneously with different types of problems, you need to understand what is the most important problem to be solved urgently as well. So I'll give an example. When I was running my company, which was in the intersection of artificial intelligence and nutrition, we had initially built a Twitter bot for our marketing acquisition, that what it would do is it would look at Twitter profiles and it would target users based on a keyword, and then it would essentially infect their Twitter with a tweet and a link to our landing page. And that was great. It was converting better than anything I've seen so far, but the problem is that Twitter blocked us after some point. And so the mentality changed completely, because we were going from hacking some sort of acquisition for free, but it couldn't scale, to now thinking, can we optimize the return on investment on a different channel? And so because we're dealing with food, we actually found Facebook to be very valuable, because we're targeting some brands from different countries. So specifically we're targeting a German bread that seemed to be converting amazingly with people in the UK. And so because we're selling the app, we had to start thinking on a different structure. So scaling is, you need to change your mentality rather than actually the things you do.